Hello, it is almost 3:30. Today is Thursday. Let me check the date. It's the 22nd of the 5th. How is it nearly June? I don't know. I don't like it because once the weather gets better, the time starts going faster. And then in the winter, it's like drags. Anyway, you're very welcome. This is MOTH News Live. My name is Keith Walsh and I'm your host. And this is a very sort of special interview for me. It's been a long time coming, and I've been speaking to this gentleman for a while, and we've been trying to, figure out when and how we might have a conversation about him and what he's been through. And then there's a bit of news that came out this week that just kind of, I'm sure it rocked him, and it certainly, I mean, look, yeah, it's just disgusting how we treat people in this country. Anyway, I have an intro written, so I'm just going to read that out. I get angry and emotional. I need to stick to the script. So, right. We've been exploring failures in Ireland's care system, from nursing homes to state institutions, and we will continue to do so. We have some interviews lined up this week, next week. So we're going to do a series about how Ireland actually doesn't care. Today we speak to another citizen failed by those same systems. Mick Finnegan was abused as a teenager. He was sexually abused as a teenager while volunteering with St. John's Ambulance Ireland. He was the first to speak publicly about it, paving the way for others to come forward. An independent report by Dr. Geoffrey Shannon, published in 2023, confirmed multiple failings by the organisation in how it handled abuse allegations, with Mick's abuser known to the organisation as far back as the 1980s. Despite this week, Minister for Children Norma Foley confirmed that there will be no statutory tribunal into the case, saying a private legal process is sufficient. No, it's not. Mick, like many survivors, and I agree, he says that's not enough. Yeah. Mick, thanks very much for joining us. I mean, all I can say is fucking hell. Like, this has to be... I mean, how are you?
I'm doing okay, it's the other survivors that I feel heartbroken and sorry for, people that have trusted me with their story and their journey, who have come forward and shared, what happened to them with the same person who groomed and sexually abused us as kids, abuse allegations going back to as far back as the 1950s. Do you know what I mean? And multiple, we're not talking like a couple of people here. Like, we're talking multiple people have come forward. Dozens upon dozens have come forward and contacted me personally to share their own journey and their own story and their own experiences of being groomed and sexually abused by this individual. And it's, despite the overwhelming evidence, and multiple people come forward, the minister, like, refusing to hold an inquiry is a bitter pill to swallow. It's heartbreaking, because we've been let down so badly, because not a single person has been held accountable for enabling and covering up this abuse. The perpetrator, he might have retired, but what about those who allowed him to continue operating? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's, like, this organization photoshopped them out of their centenary celebration booklet, celebrating 100 years of St. John Ambulance in Ireland. And it wasn't until a survivor who had the original photo in his house, he noticed that they actually photoshopped out the perpetrator of abuse. And this there was significant organizational awareness of this abuse, and they chose to do nothing. They even the stuff that they've done over the years, you know, deny, and they're still like 2 years post publication of the report, over 2 years now, and Dr. Shannon's, well, Judge Shannon, he's now a judge, like his recommendations haven't been implemented fully. And it's sad to say this, but I don't think we take child protection seriously in Ireland. You know, we are reactive. We're not proactive to safeguarding. We're reactive.
Mhm.
You know, you know, we wait until the next scandal. We wait until something else has come up. We're never proactive in stopping people and holding organizations accountable. It's always left to the survivor to drive this, to push for, you know, policy change, to push for accountability. We're not the ones elected. We're not the ones running the government. But we have to put ourselves out there and share what we went through, to embarrass, to make people feel uncomfortable in the hope that they will help us, because they do feel uncomfortable. Like, nobody wants, you know, I've had one TD come up and tell me, sure, look, would you not get on with your life now? Like, everything's fine. You know, you got the report. Like, you won. And I'm like, that's the report is like the report's the tip of the iceberg. Because of the significant organizational awareness of child sexual abuse in St. John Ambulance, then I'm pretty sure, given the fact that the organization overlapped with other emergency services in the state, I'm pretty sure the other services knew about it as well. And they chose to do nothing.
I mean, you said something there, actually, which I feel is very important, because the government will often say, when it comes to publishing reports, like, I don't know if you remember with the mother and baby home stuff, they said they'd redacted a lot of stuff. They weren't releasing reports. They weren't, you know, they were holding stuff back, and they weren't making stuff public. And they were saying it was to protect the people involved, you know, protect their, you know, keep their anonymity, whatever. When the government are saying that's a reason for keeping information from the public, but then when there's systematic abuse within an organization, where's your anonymity? Why isn't there a system where you can privately contact a TD or a, you know, social worker, tell them your story? Like, why are they so concerned about people's anonymity when it comes to them releasing stuff that they obviously don't want to release? But when it comes to your anonymity, your safety, your welfare, you have to, like, you know, and I feel for you as well, Mick, because you've taken on, like, you were the first to come out, and you've pushed it and pushed it and pushed it, and you keep pushing it. And I know you're doing it for, you know, I've met some of, you know, your former colleagues and other people who were abused by this man, and they're not doing well. Like, I believe you're the strongest of them.
Yeah, like,
and the government are making you time and time again come forward and talk about this and talk about this and talk about this. And as you said, yes, there was a report, but things weren't implemented. Nothing changed. I know that there was some sort of therapy or counselling offered, but that was you had to go back, like, that was left to St. John's Ambulance people to organise, people who were complicit, who stood by, who were witnesses to what happened and did nothing. How are the victims supposed to go back to the organisation who are complicit in the abuse, the abuse that's ruined their lives, and ask them, well, go cap in hand and ask them for a few hours of therapy? It's absolutely disgusting to think that that's okay. I mean, I don't even know if it was therapy. It was some sort of, like,
yeah, like, they are, like,
pop in and talk to us, lads. We'll give you a cup of tea and we'll have a chat, will we?
Like, I know when the report was published, the survivors that showed up for the publication of the report were brought into a room in a hotel in the centre of Dublin and put in a circle. And with people that were senior officers within the organization, PR people, and a psychotherapist that the organization organized, and it was like a forced kind of intervention. Like, before we give you the report and before we read you the apology, this is so and so, and she's gonna provide you with the support you need should any of this information is triggering to you. And I found the whole process, even on the day of the publication of the report, quite hypocritical. You know, that they were trying to force what effectively was a box ticking exercise, because it was something I highlighted with the then Minister for Children, Rodrigo Gorman. Like, what supports will be in place on the day of publication of the report, because this is gonna, you know, whatever way the report is published and whatever the findings are, it's going to upset a lot of survivors. It's going to upset a lot of members of St. John Ambulance as well. You know, but this is not how a compassionate society should treat its most vulnerable. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is not how a responsible government even addresses systemic child abuse. It's consistently left to survivors to advocate and beg for help. Now, survivors can, if anyone is watching it now, they can go and identify their own therapist or their own psychologist or their own whatever form of therapy they feel they need. They can engage with that therapist, and the therapist will invoice St. John Ambulance. That is my understanding of it now.
Okay.
But a lot of survivors don't feel that they can trust the organization to even access those therapeutic interventions, you know, because of the harm that's been caused to them. And it's tough. Like, you've met some of the lads, and they you know, they're wrapped up in addiction. They're homeless. You know, some of them are actively, you know, street drinking, you know, IV drug users. There's a small cohort of us that are, you know, managing to kind of keep our lives together by, you know, either for myself, training as a social worker to become a social worker, or other lads that are working within the paramedic services in Ireland, you know, learning the skills they learned as kids in a professional setup. It's just, I can't for the life of me, I don't understand why the government won't help us. You know, when you consistently ask, and I've been asking for a long time now. This is my fourth Minister for Children, I think, that I've engaged with. Third or fourth. You know, I've emailed every TD in the Dáil. Only a handful respond. The ones that do respond, thankfully, they are consistent in their efforts to highlight survivors. Please, you know, Paul Murphy's been brilliant at doing that. He's been like him, Chris Andrews, Paul Donnelly, you know, like Lynn Rowan, like Tom Cronin.
Tom's great.
Like, there's a small cohort of politicians who have pushed for this, and also there's also been like a, you know, there was an agreement within the Shannon cross-party agreement that calling for an inquiry, and that was before the report was published. You know, and something just doesn't add up, because, you know, the amount of survivors that have gone to the guards and have made complaints and have given statements, and nobody is being held accountable. Like they used to go away on summer camps, St. John Ambulance summer camps, and they would sing about the kids in the flats that were in St. John Ambulance getting abused by this officer. And they would use popular songs of the time, you know.
I remember I shared something on social media because I was talking to you.
Yeah.
I can't remember the song, but they used the guy's name to rhyme with something.
Yeah, you saw The Whole of the Moon. But instead of that, you saw the whole of, and then they'd mention his name, and then go on and say his tool, and they thought that was hilarious. Or the mash,
Is it suicide? Was it?
Yeah, that's the one.
Suicide is painless, and I can take or leave it if I choose.
Hang on, I have a look.
It was like do 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 do. So you have a look there. I just for the viewers. I mean, this is like we're going back to when you were in the organization. You're a young man. Was this the 80s? Are we talking 80s, 90s?
Yeah, like basically they would. Like we're talking like the 90s, because I wasn't aware of these songs, and I actually met a well-known solicitor in Dublin who was in the St. John Ambulance. I won't mention his name, but he told me that they had songbooks where they would sing about.
So when they went on, I know I was in the Scouts, and you'd go on a jamboree or you go camping or whatever. It's and
they had a campfire and all that.
Yeah,
but these would have, and I apologize for the explicit nature of these songs, but given the impact of the abuse that I suffered and so many others, I think it's important that these songs and people are aware of them. So obviously we've talked about the Waterboy song, but they also changed the words around to the Match TV show intro, which went like this: "The sword of," and then the person's surname, "will pierce your skin. Doesn't hurt when he begins. But as he works his way on in, the pain grows harder. Watch him grin." And then the chorus of the song, and all these cadets, all these people would sing this song. "Because if anal sex is painless, it brings on shades of redness, and I can bite the pillow if I please." And when you have senior officers in the organization who have knowledge of this, and they're giving this to kids, mocking poor kids, because that's the reality of the area we grew up in. We grew up in a fucking poor area. But you've got people who are from more affluent backgrounds singing these songs about kids from the flats getting raped. And nobody does anything about it. And even now, nobody wants to do anything about it.
So you, as a young lad, will be in a situation where there's senior members of the organization singing songs, mocking the poor members, the poor volunteers from the flats, as you mentioned. They're singing, and they knew, they sang and included the name of the man in the organization who was raping young children.
Yeah,
and this is and their songbooks, like it was printed on paper.
Printed out on paper and given out I won't mention the name of the cadet division, but it was given out songbooks, and I've told loads of people about this, and no one's ever been held accountable, for that. Like the fact that they were so aware of this, even prior to me joining the organization, multiple people came forward, Like one of the big things in the Shannon report was there was no records of any of us as members. But I was in the organization for over 10 years. I even won competitions in the organization, went away on camps with the organization, was at every duty in the organization, concerts, football matches, rugby matches, Mondello Park, Dublin Zoo, on duty, where this abuse and the grooming and the rape would take place. Do you know what I mean? Like survivors will be on duty being sexually abused in these medical aid posts. Like the first time I was sexually abused was at Dublin Zoo. The first time I was made perform a sex act as a child, as a cadet, I was in Dublin Zoo.
What age were you, Mick?
The grooming for me started, the sexual abuse and the grooming started for me for, like, I was 12. I joined the organisation when I was 12.
And straight away?
Yeah, straight away. This fella used first aid as a way of getting his hands on you. His MO was to tell you about the femoral artery in the groin, in the crease of the groin. And that's how you can get a more accurate pulse sight. Because taking the pulse is really important and all this stuff for first aid. And so we didn't fucking have a clue. Like, we were just, okay, go along with it. You know, we're kids.
Of course, you're getting expert advice from, yeah.
And that's what happens, you know what I mean? And then it would go on and on and on. And this fellow was at this, you know, for decades before I even joined. But the organisation refused to remove him. He was a senior officer. Like, he was the main fella. He was responsible for first aid cover at Lansdowne Road. He was the senior officer in charge of Lansdowne Road. Like, he would have been in meetings with, you know, the FAI and the Gardaí and the IRFU and the GAA and the who's who. You know, he was the main guy.
I remember talking to you and thinking it's a pity that the GAA, you know, the FAI, people that use the services of that organization couldn't stand with the victims and stop using the services of the organization until they took responsibility for what happened. And I still think there's something in that. You know, are the GAA happy to work alongside an organization that turned its back on people who were abused by its senior member, one senior member for sure, and others that were complicit and witnessed and knew about it and did nothing? Are the GAA happy to keep working with them? Are the FAI happy to keep working with them?
I've written to them too.
So you've written to them?
I've written to the GAA, the IRFU, the FAI. I've written to them all, and they and I was very explicit in everything. Told them what the crack was and my position as a survivor and advocate for survivors, and they didn't want to know. They were happy enough that the Shannon review was done and that this stuff was being implemented, and their safeguarding officers will continue to work with St. John Ambulance.
Why do you think they're reticent? Why do you think everybody is batting for the organization and not the Irish people, young Irish people, children? Why are they taking the side? I can't fathom why it's so important. The reason there's conspiracy theories is because of this kind of shit, right? Because you actually can't understand why anybody, like, say, the IRFU, GAA, the government, the Minister for why they would take the side of an organization that are complicit in the abuse of young Irish people. It's just a fucking ambulance service. It's like go in and what? So this is why conspiracy theories happen.
Yeah.
This is why people think that there's like higher ups in the country who are involved in some sort of like pedophilery. This is why it happens, because we don't deal with them. We deny, we delay, we as I said before, there isn't enough carpet left in the country because there's so many things brushed under the carpet, and this is why people are led to believe that there must be something else going on here. I don't think there is, but Jesus Christ, I can't blame people for thinking that there's something else going on here. And I would never count myself among the conspiracy theorists of this country, but I can't understand it. It's an ambulance service. Get rid of them all. Like, take the get rid of the board. Get rid of anybody that was involved in it. Because also, you're like, what about the people who are there genuinely as volunteers trying to do something good? It's not good for them either. I just cannot fathom it, Mick. I don't know how.
Because nobody cares. The reality is the people that were sexually abused as children were poor.
It's a class thing.
It's I can't. Yeah, I definitely do think it's a class thing. Nobody gives a fuck about working class lads from the flats, being sexually abused and raped by people who are privileged, and that's the reality of it. There wasn't just one perpetrator in St. John Almas. There was at least 3 identified. There was 3 identified. One even got caught in a paedophile hunter sting in England. You know what I mean? A former senior officer in St. John Almas was caught in a paedophile hunter sting in the UK and got a suspended sentence, and that's a fact. You know, another one passed away, but I was chatting to someone that was in his unit, and he was saying that man raped me, and he was a superintendent of a unit out in South County Dublin. So I've identified at least 3 perpetrators. But I believe that they were facilitating something. I don't believe, that if this was allowed to go on for so long and people were allowed to be in these positions of authority and have access to kids. And the reality is, it's easy to groom kids from the flats because we're demonized because of where we're from. We're looked down on because of our accents, or because our parents might be drug addicts, or our family are involved in criminality. So you're just a fucking scumbag. Who's going to believe you? I remember going to the police station as a kid, and my mate will tell you this. I had a job. I was homeless, sleeping rough, but I got a part-time job washing cars on the fucking Crumlin Road. JJ Kiernan and Sons. I was washing cars in there, and I broke down one day and I was telling the fella, we ended up being one of my best mates. I'm still in contact with him today, Darren O'Brien. And Darren came down to the Garda station, the Sunrise Garda station. And I went in to tell the Garda what happened to me, and they ran me. Don't be coming in here with your fucking lies. And that's the truth, and Darren will tell you that. He's living. He lives in London with his family and his kids and stuff like that. But he's been a great supporter of mine for since we were, in our teens. The impact that this has had on my life and the lives of so many other people, you can't quantify it. You genuinely can't. You can't put a fucking how we're being treated it's not right.
But you said it earlier, how we treat the most vulnerable in society. That's who we are as a society. That's what Ireland is now, and has been for a long time.
Yeah.
And we're not making it better, and things are not going to get like. You can. I think. Look, I don't want to be down on, these like darkness into light and these mental health. It's great to highlight mental health. It's great to talk. It's great to talk about therapy, and I'll always talk. And I always said therapy is good. Until we are not going to scratch the fucking surface of mental health problems in this country until the government starts taking ownership and starts dealing with these things and stop trying to victim blame and push the people that need the help, the most vulnerable, the people who have been abused by organizations who have been, gold seal, they've been given the seal of approval by the government. If we keep protecting these organizations, so it was started with the church. Now it's this, and if we continue to protect these organizations over our people, there is no point in doing anything else about our mental health in this country. Because let me just paint you a picture for anybody that doesn't understand the circle and the cycle of I watched a TD on the news one day, and he referred to people on O'Connell Street, and saying why O'Connell Street was in such a state, and he said it was to do with the junkies, right? Let me just paint you a picture of how somebody might become a junkie. And to be called a junkie, somebody with an addiction, you go into an organization as a volunteer, as a young man, you think you're doing a good thing because it's your, it's your civic duty. You're told to, I can remember being told, get involved, volunteer, help out. You're being a good person. You're being a good citizen. There's, for a young man to do that, you're going, yeah, great. This is great. He's becoming a rounded individual, a member of society. He's making good decisions. You enter that organization and you are raped by a man consistently, right? Over a period of time, right? And then nobody believes you. And then, because you don't know what else to do, and you don't know where to turn, and you find a way of coping, and that coping sometimes is a medication, and that medication might be heroin, and that medication might be alcohol, or that medication might be whatever, but you've found a way of living. This medication is saving your life.
Yeah.
It's getting you from day to day, right? Because of what happened to you. Because of what happened to you in an institution, and then the government, these people who will not look after, who have created this situation, will stand and speak on the news and talk about junk. I tell you where those junkies came from. They came from the fucking government who run this country. And don't call, these are citizens who have been wronged. Yeah. And people talking about taking drugs is a choice. Because they've chosen to be homeless, because they've chosen to be strung out, because they've chosen to be a slave to the drug dealer. I can tell you now that is not a choice. That is a situation that they've been put in by the people of this country, the government and the citizens, and us, because we turn a blind eye. That's the cycle of the so-called of a lot of people in this country.
I think people that use drugs or alcohol, myself included, I drank every day to kind of escape the reality and the flashbacks of the trauma that I experienced. I would, the nightmares, the flashbacks, I couldn't cope. Genuinely couldn't cope with how I was feeling. I drank so much. Every day I was drinking in Dublin, every day. And I couldn't tell you how many pubs I got barred out of for telling a fucking publican or a member of staff or even a fucking patron that was sitting next to me to fuck off, because I couldn't cope with what I was feeling. I couldn't cope with the being left behind, not being cared for, not being, taken seriously. It's all well and good that they do these reports, the review, the Geoffrey Shannon review is a wonderful document in relation to highlighting the gaps and the safeguarding the safeguarding policies and procedures that didn't exist within St. John Ambulance. But the minister's inaction, sends a clear message that the pain of survivors, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? And that the rape of children is something we can just move on from. That institutional reputations matter more than justice. And for me, it's fucking hard to move on from it. I keep telling myself I'll stop sending emails. I'll stop writing to politicians. I'll stop emailing TDs and senators to put parliamentary questions into the minister, but I can't. I can't because I feel like I'm letting down everybody, because nobody wants to do this. Nobody wants to keep highlighting the lack of accountability. Nobody wants to keep highlighting the lack of support for survivors. But and when you highlight this to the minister or even the previous minister, it's all met with, oh geez, we're really sorry it happened to you. But they've done all this. They've got these new policies in place and the new safeguarding officer. That means fuck all to a man on the street, drinking, sleeping rough, who can't maintain or manage relationships or even friendships because he was raped as a kid, because he was sexually abused in that organization. It's great for the organization that they're doing that. It's great that they're future-proofing the organization. But when you've got so many survivors that are affected by this, and then you put your hand in your pocket and give them 100 grand government funding, it just, you might as well just slap every survivor in the face.
Yeah, how about not funding them anymore and giving you guys some money so you can get your, get some sort of, some people need, like, I just, so let's just break this down. So there's policies now within the organization. They've changed their policies. They're better safeguarding, future proofing. Hopefully
they have Garda vetting now as well, which is great.
Brilliant,
so,
yeah.
And it is like for me, I'm not being kind of one of these bitter bastards who hates the organization. I don't hate the organization.
I know.
I've probably got every right to be.
Yeah.
Fuck St. John Ambulance, and sometimes I do think that. But there are some great people in that organization. Some of them are still my friends. Some of them are still my friends, and some of them are very much, devastated with what happened. Devastated.
But do you feel that for them to remain with the organization and not protest by just leaving, like, do you feel hurt by that?
No, because it's not their fault. What happened to me wasn't their fault. Like the people's fault, the enablers, the senior officers that knew, from the top right down. And they all knew. Like I remember some members would tell, and I was oblivious to this at the time. But whenever I was a cadet and there was another young cadet with me, and there's like a few of them now that are my friends, I won't mention their names, they're no longer in the organization, but they're senior nurses within the health service, or they're firefighters, or they're members of Garda Síochána, and they weren't allowed to be on their own with this man. Nobody was allowed. Like, every unit was made sure that their cadets, their kids were protected from this guy, except the cadets in his own division. I'm like, and that's literally, I know I'll keep saying this till the cows come home. It is because we were from the flats. Because where Old Command and Manma's division was based, was directly opposite Dolphins Bar and Flats. Do you know what I mean? In St. Andrew's Community Centre. So the area already had its own issues, and like for us joining, it was a way of kind of keeping us off the streets, gaining new skills, maybe getting a bit of an identity, maybe even escaping from that area and maybe going on to kind of do something that goes against the statistics of the area I grew up in, where the majority of the people, unfortunately, end up wrapped up in addiction or criminality or they're dead,
But you're trying, as a young man, to prove to the world that you're a good person, that you have value.
Yeah,
every young person gets to that point. Everybody, where they just want to try prove themselves in whatever way, and obviously, then you end up in this division with this man in charge, and.
It's like, I'll be honest with you, like there's a lot of, every time I see like the progress reports, and like the minister holds them up as if it's some sort of fucking, you're getting a gold star, or oh yeah, we've just had another progress report, but none of them have delivered any meaningful change, or justice. And I firmly believe their paper exercise is designed to give the illusion of action. Do you know what I mean? That they're doing something, but it's all smokes and mirrors.
And this is a progress report, specifically about this organization. They'll come out with the progress report. Where are we at now?
There's nothing.
Is that that's what they're doing?
Yeah,
They're
this
just
is
coming
it
out with
basically. Like this is what we've done now. This is what we're doing next. This is what we're gonna.
You don't give a fuck about that, do you?
I don't care about that. I don't care. Like.
Okay, and can I just
care
say
about the people that were harmed. That's
Yeah.
what I care about. I care about the lads on the street. Like, I haven't got a pot to piss in, but if one of the boys texts me and he goes, "Can you revolute me a fiver? I want to get a couple of cans or a tenner," I'll do everything I can to get him a tenner. Like the impact,
sorry.
it's had on so many survivors, like it's fucking crazy. I know lads that have killed themselves over this. They've died. I know lads who have, you know, they're like they've told me, and they're terrified of their wives and kids finding out. Because they see how I've been treated. They see how, you know, Martin Howie's been treated, or Paul Mulholland, or the other survivors that have come forward, how they've been alienated and marginalised. It's shocking, you know. It's upsetting.
The fact that there's so I'm sure Judge Shannon was paid for his work.
He actually, if I remember correctly, I don't think he took a fee.
Okay,
he did it for free, I think.
Fair play to him, and that's a good thing to do. But I'm sure within the administration of you know, sorting out his report and getting it out there and publishing it and typing it up or whatever it needed to be, and you know, I'm sure there's money went into that report, right? I'm sure money continues to go into these progress reports. I'm sure money continues to go into St. John's Ambulance, 100 grand. What do they get from the government every year?
100 grand is for the National Safeguarding Officer. I think he is in the process of currently doing a review, an audit of the organisation on a national level in relation to how what their safeguarding policies are like, and how they're going to implement the Shannon recommendations going forward. And look, that's a great thing. And the guy that's doing it, who is the National Safeguarding Officer, he has a lot of experience. He's a former senior investigator in the Guards, who specialised in child protection. I've heard a lot of good things about him, and I've nothing but respect for him. But the reality is, there's a corrupted culture within St. John Ambulance, a toxic culture, you know, of you know, where the only thing they care about is the organization's reputation.
Well, it's,
you know, like they went to the minister saying that they'd no money for the safeguarding officer, but they found enough money to pay for their PR firm and their spin doctors. You know, they went to what are they called? Drury. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't be cheap. Do you know what I mean? It's
so they found money to spend on PR around what was going to happen. You said about being in that room when the report was published, and the PR people, and you're all in a circle and you're all like, this is forced. Like, here we go now, lads, shake hands, and this is all great, isn't it?
It was like a really bad AA meeting. It was like an AA meeting. It was like something out of the fucking Office. It was so awkward. It was like ridiculous. Like, we get brought into a room, they have little croissants and orange juice and sparkling water on a table in this fancy hotel in the centre of Dublin. The reports are all stacked there, and they think they literally try and have a dialogue with survivors.
You must have been sick.
All right, fucking. I lost it with them. I told them to get the fuck away from me and don't come near me. And one of them followed me out of the room, and they were like, "You must believe us. We knew nothing." And I'm like, "Get the fuck away from me."
It doesn't matter what.
Get away from me. And I like. It was one of the worst ways of doing something like that. It's like a textbook of like what not to do. You know, you've all these people who are damaged, traumatized. They're all in tears. I'm the youngest, by the way, in the room. I'm the youngest survivor amongst the group.
Did you know that was happening?
We were told to be there and that we'd get given a copy of the report, and that was it. We didn't know this was happening. We weren't told that this was going to happen. No one told us that, you know, you're going to be brought into a room put in a circle and listen to this to senior officers within St. John Ambulance read out an apology, and if you want, there's the copy of the report. I listened to the apology, and one of the survivors broke down next to me. I can't say his name because he doesn't want to give it. He doesn't want to come forward and doesn't want to waive his anonymity. And he asked, I remember he was in tears. This fella's in his like mid-60s, crying his eyes out next to me. I'm just fucking angry. I want to, like, I'll be honest, I had to leave the room because I wanted to punch a few heads in.
I can't blame you.
And
so can I ask you, the only people that didn't in that room that didn't know that was happening, because obviously there was a
survivors didn't know that was happening like that. Like, we were told
the survivors were the only people in the room that didn't know about this fucking prearranged Mickey Mouse fucking.
We were told to be. We were told that we would be given a copy at the hotel and to be at the hotel at a certain time. We had to go to the reception in the hotel. There was no one downstairs from the organisation to direct us where we had to go. We got into the lift.
So once again, you're being treated like because the PR firm, St. John's Ambulance, the directors, the people, the government minister, whatever, they're all in the fuck. They all know what's going on. They're all enjoying the sandwiches and once again.
So Primetime had a copy of the report. They had Primetime was able to tell everyone what was in the report before the report was published. Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone knew what was going on except the survivors. I was sitting there, like, lads like Mark Pender, you know. I knew Mark as a kid, like, you know, going on duty and stuff. And he's a shadow of himself now. The impact it's had on him, you know. The impact it's had on all of us. Like, it's just fucking. It's hard. It's hard to constantly keep it's hard to keep doing these interviews, you know, but it's the only thing that keeps it
keeps it alive, keeps your
keeps it alive, it keeps the pressure on the government, because I'm not going away. Like, I'll be honest with you, like, unless, you know, like, I'm not going away. Unless they lock me up or something, I'm not going away. I'm going to keep highlighting this. You know, we did nothing wrong. And all we're asking for is an inquiry into what went wrong and how this was able to go on for over half. It wasn't just 10 or 20 years. We're talking over half a century here. Because it goes back to the 1950s, at least.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the thing about an inquiry, like, it's more of this. I don't know if you read the article by God, I keep forgetting his name, about how the government departments deal with whistleblowers, essentially, this delay,
deny, yeah.
Can't remember what the third D is, but
I'll tell you
this
now.
This is what we do.
Yeah, and
this is what we do, and these aren't
delay, deny, destroy.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, the fact that you said that there was no evidence of you being a member of the organization, having been there for 10 years, like, yeah.
So there was none. There was like that. There was. I remember getting brought to a hotel when I just. So I made it. There was. I remember when I disclosed this. I disclosed I left Old Kilmainham Ambulance Division, and I put a transfer request in because I was terrified because he beat me up and he raped me. I put a transfer request in to leave the organisation and join Walkinstown Ambulance Division. And when I was in Walkinstown Ambulance Division, I told 2 senior officers in that division what happened. And then I had a meeting with the assistant commissioner at the time, Jerry Shorthall. You know? And a phone call from the then child protection officer.
Yeah.
I never met her, and she never actually, you know, and this is when, like, you know, we're not talking, you know, 30, 40 years ago. Like, there was children's force legislation in place. There was, you know, there was an obligation to mandatory report this, and it never was reported.
So the child safety officer within the organization, you had a phone call with them.
The child protection officer, this
is literally her job.
Yeah, there was no disclosure back then. Jerry Shorthall, he's passed away. That's why I'm using his name. Like he was the assistant commissioner at the time, and he took me to a hotel, the Burlington Hotel, when it was open back in the day, and he handed me a wad of cash. Told me to keep my mouth shut. Yeah, yeah, keep my mouth shut, and you can collect that every month.
How much?
I don't know. I fucking lost it. Flipped the table, tried the bathroom. Yeah, that's the truth. And that,
Do you think he'd done that with anybody else?
I don't know. I think like people will say like he was well meaning and stuff like that, but that's the reality of it. Like that's what happened.
But like, it doesn't matter what is well meaning. That's not the point. Like other people's attitude to your abuse is not important. Like, stop having an opinion on whether someone was well meaning or not. It's the victim. It's the only person that needs to tell that story or tell how they feel about it or what someone meant or didn't mean is the victim. And we need to stop having opinions on whether someone meant something or not, or what they meant, or, well, no, sure, he's not that bad. Just listen to the victims.
And that's the reality is they don't listen to the victims. They don't want to know, And I remember like even when I ended up having a mental breakdown in London, and I was, sitting in the psychiatric unit at the time, and I emailed the then commissioner, Patrick Plunkett, and that was in 2011. I'm actually looking at the email now that I have from him.
Yeah, you can read away, it's fine.
And he said, "Michael, I'm sorry to hear this. I only became aware that there was some concern about Mr. after I had taken over the role as commissioner. Having been through what files we have, I was unable to find tangential references with nothing specific. These included a copy of a statement made by the Gardaí by the late Mr. Shorthall. These cases are difficult to prosecute based on my own professional knowledge, and I assume the DPP took a decision that there was insufficient corroborative evidence to bring a successful prosecution. Patently, such matters are very different and difficult to prove, and the law leans towards innocence until proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In the circumstance of a child and adult alone, the evidence to prove this can be difficult to find. Nevertheless, suspicion itself should be sufficient to make the organisation intervene and prevent further damage. Ultimately, in the situation that Mr. was never prosecuted by the authorities, the decision appears to have been taken that he was not suitable to remain in the brigade, and he was persuaded to resign. I can understand that this is not a satisfactory conclusion, but I am equally satisfied that this was a sadly belated attempt to protect vulnerable children. I am only too prepared to apologise on behalf of St. John Ambulance for the hurt you have suffered." And then he goes on and talks about a child protection officer that he has invited, an external social worker that he invited to chair the child protection committee, and that she would support the committee formed of interesting members with specific skills to ensure that the organisation takes safeguarding seriously. But the Shannon report highlighted that there were safeguarding concerns as far back as 2019. And I know that when the review was commissioned, that child protection officer stepped down from the organisation and didn't want anything to do with it. But she did make a referral to Tusla. Well, actually, it wasn't Tusla then. It was to the HSC. And then that referral got lost. And then I remember getting contacted, I think, 6 years ago or something like that, by Tusla asking me if I wanted to continue to do anything about this. Yeah. And then they did an investigation into the perpetrator and found that the allegations against him were founded, and not just for me but other survivors as well. So that's something, but it's not enough.
So TUSLA also did an investigation. So there's how many reports are there now?
TUSLA, I think, interviewed a number of survivors, and I think the allegations against him were founded, yeah. And that's just a letter that each survivor would get, just to say that they've done and they came to their determination that the allegations against the perpetrator are founded.
So TUSLA said it, did the investigation, Judge Shannon.
Yeah, the Shannon report said it, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else?
That's it. Yeah.
The recommendations from Judge Shannon, a lot of that stuff has, like, they've done some of it.
Some of it's done, and it's great to see. But that's not, like, for me, that's not a decision.
It means nothing to you. Yeah, it means nothing to you.
It means nothing to me because I'm not a member of St. John Ambulance.
Was there ever a recommendation that you guys should be compensated financially so you get your shit together?
There was no recommendation for redress. No. Never. No.
Because surely, and people would say, well, it's not about it. I tell you, this is about the money, right? And I tell you why it's about the money. Because the reason the government behave the way they do, and the reason they implement the 3Ds, is because of money, because they don't want to give people. And money is how the world goes round. Money is how people pay rent. Money is how people buy food. This is not some sort of like, sure, look at this is important. I feel it's important.
Yeah, look.
So even if we can look at this, and even if Miss Foley said we're going to carry out an event. What was it?
An inquiry.
An inquiry. How long is that going to take? How much money is going to be spent? Yeah. How much money do you think an inquiry would cost?
Probably in the millions. I don't know.
Millions.
But I think, I'll be honest with you, I think the perpetrator is being protected, and I think that is down to the fact of the amount of people that were involved in all of this, to people that sexually abused kids in the organization. And as I said earlier on, there's at least 3 people that have been identified by survivors as perpetrators. Do you know what I mean? There's also the people that facilitated it and enabled it. And there's also the people that chose to do nothing and keep their mouth shut.
But it does beg the question, why are these people being protected? What do they know? That's why conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Come here, listen. You're preaching to the converted here. Like, for me, I want nothing more than I would love nothing more than to have an inquiry, to have somebody there that will, do the right thing, because we're being stonewalled. Like the minister, I've written to the minister since she was appointed minister, and she's refused to meet me and survivors. She doesn't want to know. And the fact that she doesn't even which is a stark contrast with the previous minister, Roger O'Gorman. He would meet with survivors. He would meet with me. He would even actually call me and give me updates and let me know what was going on and respond to the emails personally. But I get the response back from an advisor or a parliamentary assistant or private secretaries. You know what I mean? I don't get a response from the minister herself. And as a result of that, and also, her organization, her department, repeatedly telling TDs that that St. John Ambulance is providing outreach supports. You know, that in itself re-traumatizes survivors because it gives the impression that something's being done, and nothing is being done. Nothing is being done to support survivors with it, of child sexual abuse. That's the hard bit to deal with,
So everybody, like, if we just break this down and almost like everybody is getting paid, everybody is getting a salary, everybody involved in this, everybody except the survivors.
Look, I'll be honest with you, Kate, like when this report was published, I had a mental breakdown to the point where I lost everything. My home, I was sleeping rough again in Dublin, I was accessing homeless services, I was in and out of North Dublin homeless mental health team who arranged for me to take my medication on a monthly basis because I was sleeping rough on the streets of Dublin. My life spiraled out of control, and now I'm slowly getting back on my feet, where I'm not on the streets, where I'm training to be a social worker, where I'm trying to have a purpose in life that is beyond St. John's Ambulance. But the impact that this has had on so many of us, there are no words for it. Like we're like we're an inconvenient truth. That's the reality of it. And instead of, we're not being treated, like human beings who deserve justice. Because no one wants to know. Like I've written to everyone and nobody wants to know. So I put a complaint into SIPO, and I hope that they will hold the minister accountable for her lack of engagement and gaslighting and misinformation,
Have you hoped that they will?
Well, they got back to me and they said they would. They'd be back in touch with me. I got an email from them. When was it? Yeah. Dear Mr. Finnegan, I wish to acknowledge receipt of your correspondence of today's date. The office will respond in due course. That was the 9th of May. And that was, I made a complaint specifically against the minister, And, I complained on, I formally complained under Section 10(1) of the Ethics in Public Office Act. Failure to maintain proper standards, refusal to engage with survivors, and investigate whether these acts conduct inconsistent with proper performance of our duties. And particularly around that kind of the false statements conflating outreach with therapy. Outreach is outreach and therapy is therapy. Therapy is a therapeutic intervention where you sit in front of somebody and you talk and explore the trauma you've experienced. Outreach is when you're on the streets and you are, doing whatever. And people provide that outreach because people don't want to engage with the services. And to say that St. John Ambulance were providing that outreach support has only caused further harm to survivors, and it's that's unacceptable. And that's why I chose to make that complaint to SIPO. And I hope they take it seriously.
Yeah, maybe she made a mistake. Maybe she was genuinely confused about the two things. I mean, the funny thing is, you're as engaged in this process as is possible to be. So I don't know what. Like, they know where to find you if they want to give you something, if they want to help you in some way. What would you like to see happening, and what do you think should happen for not so much for yourself? Because I think if it was just you, Mick, to be honest with you, I think you'd have maybe, you've got you're doing other things. I know you're on a marathon. I know you're studying. I believe you're doing it for other people a lot. I mean, what what would you think is the right thing to do by the other survivors?
Yeah, I think like ideally I'd like to see some form of accountability either for the perpetrator to be prosecuted and charged and brought before the courts, or the organization to be held accountable properly.
Can you just so this person still alive?
Yeah, he's in his mid-90s now, I think.
Never brought
He's been arrested once, I think, twice.
anything happen?
No, nothing. In fact, as I'm talking to you, one of the survivors emailed me a disappointing letter because he was hoping, and I won't say his name, but basically it's from the DPP, and it basically says, "I'm responding to your recent request for a summary of the reasons of our decision not to prosecute."
And they're sticking by their guns.
Yeah, and that's literally, that letter's date the 20th of May. You know?
Yeah, I just don't. I can't for the life of me understand why we continue to protect the people that cause the most harm in this country, and we ignore and reject and the people who have been abused. People like yourself, Mick. I mean, you should be lauded as a hero in this country, you know. The only reason that any of those changes happened within that organization was because you came forward and you kept talking and you kept talking, and then that Mr. Shannon did his report and the recommendations. None of that would have happened.
Yeah.
Which is useless to you because you can't go into it. You can't go in and get into a bank and get a mortgage and say, well, look, I helped out with I made St. John's Ambulance better organization. Can you use that as a deposit?
Yeah. It's who we are. This is who we are. This is who Ireland. This is what Ireland is. This is how we this is how we behave. This is what we do to people. We allow abuse to happen and then we side with the abusers. We do it consistently. And it's not like isolated incidents. This is consistently. And I think it's a class thing. In a lot of cases, it's a class thing and it's a money thing. I do,
and we should be better than this. We should be better than this, shouldn't we?
Yeah, but I think it's a class thing because there are people who are from, and it's not to take away from what happened to them, but they are from a more affluent background and they have an inquiry. You know, they have justice. You know, when you read about people who have been in great positions of trust and being in places of, you know, effectively where tomorrow's leaders are educated, and they go on and abuse kids in those schools, you know, they're held accountable. They're prosecuted, regardless of the time that it's took to kind of for these poor victims to come forward. And it's hard. Like, it is hard to kind of, you know, we see it all the time. Like, every time there's someone being convicted of something that's similar to what we all experienced as kids, one of the survivors will put in a WhatsApp chat, why isn't that happening for us? And it comes down to the fact that we are from a socio-economically deprived area, and nobody will convince me of that otherwise. Because we're not connected. You know, we're not part of some old boys group. You know, we're not in an organization, or, you know, We don't have the same level of protection or the finances or the money. Nobody cares about us. Nobody. That's the reality of it. I don't mean that in a bad way or poor me. Because if politicians cared and if people cared, this wouldn't have gone on for so long. You know? It wouldn't. Every party leader would be highlighting it in the Dáil. I'm yet to see any party leader highlight it in the Dáil. I've seen a couple of TDs highlight it and the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach saying how great all the survivors are. But
nothing has actually been done for you guys. Nothing has actually been done for you guys.
Symbolic pats on the back and saying how great we are on the public record doesn't put food in the fridge, doesn't keep a roof over people's heads, doesn't actually help meet the immediate needs of people who are actually genuinely struggling and suffering, even today, as a result of the child sexual abuse they experienced in St. John Ambulance. And while everybody else can forgive and forget, and I'll be honest with you, I have forgiven the person that did this to me, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to move on with my life. I really wouldn't. But I can't forget. I can't forget. I can't just walk away from this and think, you know what? I've done enough. There has to be something else. There has to be someone somewhere with a bit of courage and an ounce of humanity who will just go, do you know what? Let's try and support these. Let's get behind these survivors. Let's meet with the survivors and see how we can help and support them. Because these survivors were in the pub. The survivors were out there providing a service to the public when they were kids. Yeah. First aid at concerts, football matches, Funderland, Dublin Zoo, Mondello Park for the motor racing and stuff like that. The GAA, Crow Park and stuff. They were serving the public. But now the public doesn't want to know. Because if the public wanted to know, there would be an uproar, there would be a reckoning. You know, there would be protests supporting male survivors of sexual abuse.
I mean, where's the aid for you guys when you need it?
There's none. You know? There is none. There's nothing there. You know, there's a few politicians who've been consistent in their support, and they've been brilliant. You know, Chris Andrews, Tom Clonan, you know, Paul Donnelly.
But still,
Paul Murphy. Like, they've been great. Like, they have been great, and they've been relentless in asking questions. But the parties that lead this country and the leaders of the biggest political parties in this country don't want to know. Because if they did, they'd be more proactive in providing support. Yeah. They'd be more proactive in calling out for accountability. They'd be ensuring that this won't happen again. You know what I mean? But it will happen again. It'll be another organization in 10, 15 years' time, or 2 years down the line, you know?
Yeah, because as long as we deny and push it under the carpet, we won't learn. We need to learn from our mistakes. That's how.
Right out of the state's playbook, isn't it? Delay, deny, destroy. And it's set up in that way to destroy survivors. You know, if we can't, you know, if they don't go away, we'll talk shit about them, or we'll make rumors up about them, or we'll say that they're, you know, difficult to deal with, or they don't play well with others, or you know, you saw what they did with other whistleblowers like Noel McGree or Maurice McCabe, where they fucking said abhorrent things about them. You know,
that is, but you know, that's who we are. That's who we are as a country.
It's shocking and it's archaic, because when I tell people who are my friends, like, I remember I walked the Camino 3 or 4 years ago, and people were asking me why. I was very honest and told them why. They couldn't believe it. You know, there's been no accountability whatsoever. And it's heartbreaking. It's fucking... It makes me angry thinking about it sometimes, you know?
All the time, I'd say. Mick, I can let you go unless there's anything else you wanted to say.
No, that's it. Thanks very much for having me. I really appreciate it, Keith.
I really appreciate your time, and we'll definitely talk again and keep in touch. If there's any developments, look, all we can do is push this out there, and you've been doing it for so long. I don't know. I mean, just
yeah, it's exhausting and it's draining. Like every time you get an email off a TD or a politician or a minister, you know, they just don't want to know. I know the Minister for Children doesn't want to know. She couldn't care less. She couldn't, because if she did, she'd prioritise meeting with survivors and try and reassure them. At least Rodrigo Gorman did that, you know. And for everyone that will, you know, slag him off and say X, Y, and Z about him, he's probably one of the more kinder politicians I've ever met, and I was always grateful for his engagement and his support, because it did make all the difference, you know.
Yeah, because even that feeling like you're being listened to by somebody,
it's it's just a bit of kindness and humanity. It costs nothing, you know.
Mick, thanks very much. Stay in touch.
Yeah, we'll do, Keith. Thank you.
College stuff, and we'll be talking. Yeah, mind yourself.
Yeah. Chat to you soon.
You need to lie down now.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a nap.
All right. Good luck.
See you.
See you, Mick. Yeah, there you go. There's Mick. God, my heart goes out to my net. You feel helpless. But once again, we're seeing how this government treats survivors of abuse, less well off, people in care, people who are in need of the most assistance. This is how we treat them. And that's who we are. Are we happy about that? You can protest all you like about people living in this country or moving to this country from other countries. All you like. But this is the problem. How we treat people. How Irish people treat other people. Anyway, thanks for watching. My name is Keith Walsh. This has been MOTH News. We will be back later on. I think we're doing a live tonight at 9 o'clock. And we'll be on tomorrow at 3 o'clock. If you have a story you want to share and tell people about it, let us know. Send us a message. You can follow us on social media. We're on X, on Instagram, at @moth_news, at @mothnews_. Send us a direct message. We'll get back to you. If there's anything we can do, we will. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm going to have a little nap myself. Good luck.